and impact teams that happen at the organization level and even at the macroeconomic level that are just outside of their control. A team is not a closed system. And I would beg you, whatever you do, don't use these measures for people. Don't ask questions like what's Mary's throughput or Bob's cycle time. That those are not useful, helpful things. So Deming famously noted, a bad system will defeat a good person every time. And we know that a bad system will chip away at your soul. Bad systems can turn even the most enthusiastic people into frustrated and poor performers. So as leaders in systems in organizations, our responsibility is to create an environment where people can thrive and use these as measures in that context. So final slide from me then is just a call to action, basically, that we are system designers. We can use throughput and cycle time to measure the effectiveness of our system designs. And so we design systems of work that enable us to create products and services in a more joyful way that delight our customers. The rest of this has some slides. I think Dee will make the slide deck available afterwards. But if we don't have time for questions today in as much detail as you'd like, feel free to reach out anytime. Always happy to chat. And there's some references in here. So with that, I will stop sharing. And Vince is going to talk us through some examples.
Okay, can everybody see my screen? Ken, if you can,
yeah,
okay.
All good.
So what I'll do, and again, like Ken, thanks very much for that, Ken. There's a lot of things I think we can relate to when we show this example here, but there's a lot of people who are on this call as well who have participated in the development of these flow metrics. So I'm not going to go through all that, but thank you to all of you as well. So what I'd like to do is just to go through just quickly for the next 10 minutes, just to give a case study to show you how we've implemented these flow metrics within Fidelity and the results that we have got as a result of that as well. But a few things just to keep in mind with when you start thinking about these lean or these flow metrics is when we developed these in Fidelity, they were primarily developed for a team to help a team improve. So it's like what Ken was talking about there is like it's not about it's the system more than taking a look at individual peoples as well, but they are developed primarily for teams to help them improve. The metrics are process independent, so it doesn't matter. Like a lot of people say, oh, we're doing Scrum, these aren't really applicable to us, but they are applicable. So we'll be able to show examples there again that they work just as well for Scrum as they do for Kanban teams. In our case, they're automatically generated, so you don't have to do anything in Fidelity. All you have to do is be tracking your work, and these things are automatically generated for you. You don't have to change your way of working. You don't have to enforce a process. They're there for you. And they're lean metrics, as we said. We got a lot of inspiration from initially they were there in manufacturing, as Ken referred to as well, but they're more and more getting into the software industry. So white papers that Ken has written, but also another very good one would be actionable metrics from Siemens Healthcare was another one that we got a lot of insights from. And what we did in Fidelity was that we really focused a lot on making these actionable. So when you see these metrics that immediately you feel there's something we can do here that we can actually improve, but they're simple to understand as well, because many people may be looking at lean metrics and see the cumulative flow diagrams and so on, and they get a little bit confused. What we want to do was to move, I know it's a bit of blasphemy maybe, Ken, but we wanted to move away from the cumulative flow just to make them very intuitive so you know immediately what this is actually telling you. In our case, what we also do is that we found that there's many different users for these. Teams find them very insightful because immediately they can see exactly what's happening in their own team and they can take actions to improve, but they've all the data that they need in one place ready for the retrospectives. Product owners find it interesting because we've got a nice way where you can take a look at your work in progress, but also take a look at the amount of work that's in the backlog. We've created a summary dashboard for leaders where they can come in and ask questions. So again, this is an important thing here, that they're not looking at Bob or Mary, as you talked about, Ken, but they're able to come in and just ask the right kind of questions. So coaches need to be involved here to ensure that the leaders are going to be asking the right thing. And it's not about comparison, but to see what kind of level, what kind of support they can actually provide. And coaches tend to like these metrics too, because it provides a very simple way that they can measure the impact of an engagement or an improvement. And you can start seeing trends to see how are we actually doing. So very quickly, we'll just take a look at what these look like in Fidelity. So They're very simple kind of things to look at. On the top here, you'll be able to see this is your throughput. So as Ken was saying again, this is a simple count of the number of stories that are being delivered. In our case, we're looking at the number of stories that are being delivered every week. You can see on average that for this particular squad or team that they're delivering 9 stories. You can see that it's relatively consistent. What you don't like to see is this kind of a sawtooth pattern where you deliver a little and then you deliver a lot and little and a lot. You like to see this kind of consistency, so we're getting more and more predictable. Down here in the bottom left, you can see your cycle time. So cycle time again is just a measure to see how fast are the team or the squad delivering the software. So it starts the moment when the team starts working on a story, and it stops when the story is done. So each one of these blue dots here represent a story. And you can see here that on average, the cycle time is 11 days. So people ask, is 11 days good? If you think that your duration of your sprint is typically 2 weeks, so in our case, 14 days, we include weekends, well, then this isn't bad, because we're saying on average stories are actually being delivered within our sprint. One thing you can do, if you're up here, we can configure our dashboard now to be able to set a cycle time limit. So if you say 14 days is too big for our project, well, and you'd like to set it 7 days, well, you're enabled to set your target for wherever you want it to be. But you can also see in this case here is we have a number of stories that are outliers, something coming in 64 days. So we'll talk about those in just a moment too. Another feature that we have here is this histogram on the right-hand side or the bottom right. So a concern that I would have over here is when you're looking at this chart here is that you can see that, gradually our cycle time is increasing. So what is the reason for that? But you can also see that probably 25% of our stories are coming in 1 day or less. So the kind of questions that you want to be able to ask your squad there would be, are we really delivering value in these stories if they're coming in 1 day? So a lot of information there that you can have just to, like these metrics, really all they do is they're a starting point for conversation so that you can identify the impediments and things that Ken was talking about. On the right hand side, you can also see that this is our lead time. So a lead time is how long does it take from the moment that a story is created and it's put in our backlog until it's delivered? So in our case, in this particular case, it's 41 days. Nice kind of, nice kind of patterns here. But again, there's some of these kind of stories that are outliers. So if you wanted to see these stories in more detail, you can just select them. The stories would be represented up here, and you can see in this case, this is a story that it took 64 days to be delivered, but the actual amount of time you were working on it was only 8 days. So this was blocked for, like, the flow efficiency is 13%, so it was blocked 87% of the time. The same way with this next story down here, it was blocked for 84% of the time. So again, that's good information to figure out, well, what was this impediment and why is this thing happening? But it's something for the team to actually understand and for them to have a conversation about. If you're looking at, actually, there's another thing that we like up here is this kind of a gold star indicator up here. I know Tom Lohan is on the call. He'd like to see this, but this was something that he had researched there as well within the Gartner report. But we want to be able to say that the quality of this data is good. So this is something that's sourced from a trusted data source. And if you get that, well, you get a gold star. If it's a popular report, you can get another gold star. If you're synced with our hierarchies that we use within Fidelity, well, then you'll get another gold star as well. So it's a nice kind of indicator that we have there. This is a view that we have, say, like coaches find this view where you'd like to maybe take a look at your cycle time trending over time. So we're looking, say, from April, May, June out to August. You can see on average, the cycle times are good, from 5, 6, 8 days. Again, you can see these outliers that are happening here. But where we want to get to is this kind of a situation where we're predictable. Again, it's another word that you'd use, Ken, there. So we're looking at the 85th percentile down here. So if you're looking at 10, 11, 10 days, that you can see that in this particular squad, we could say if we've planned a story in a particular sprint, we can say with 85% certainty that's going to be delivered, because 85% of the stories are coming in 10 days and 11 days and 10 days. So this is where we want to get to. What's a little bit concerning is when you start looking over here and you can start seeing the graph is starting to rise here again. So very early, you've got the information where we can start being proactive and start taking action to say, well, what is happening here when our cycle times are starting to increase like that? We have another view that is available for our leaders. So this is just a snapshot that just says, what is it that our leaders are interested in? They want to take a look at speed, again, like your cycle time. So you can see here it's 7 days, no action to be taken. But if they wanted a little bit more insight, 55% of the stories are coming in less than 7 days, 26 between 8 and 14 days, but there's still 19% of our stories are over 14 days. So that's something that maybe we should start looking at. You can look at the patterns and your predictability here. So all of these things here, you can see this thing I was talking about, a little bit of the sawtooth pattern. We're delivering a little and deliver a lot. Maybe it's something we need to look into. We're starting to get more consistent here again within August, but on average for the last 4 months, 9 stories per week. If you're looking at where we are for this month here, is that on average we're delivering 11 stories per week, but we're currently working on, our WIP is 19. So you again, Ken, I'm sorry for referring to you again, but we start talking about the limiting your work in progress. So there's another law that we have there called Little's Law, which is the relationship between cycle time, WIP, and throughput. So cycle time is equal to your WIP divided by your throughput. So if you want to get faster, you should limit the amount of things that you're doing at one time. But really what this is saying is that you need to have a balanced system, and you need to start work at the same rate you're finishing it. So we should roughly be working on the same amount of things that we're able to finish. So in this team here, we're nearly working on twice as many things. So the kind of actions that we'd be taking would be just to reduce the amount of things we're working on at one time. Other things we look at here is process compliance. So we don't like this kind of behavior of stories going directly from backlog to done. So if you move a story from backlog to done, it never went into a work in progress. You never get a cycle time measurement because it never went into a work in progress state. So we monitor that just because we know that engineers just, sometimes they're not as diligent in the work intake, that they could be working on something without putting into a work in progress. So we're just trying to make sure that we get as many of them as possible going into work in progress state when they're ready. This is the flow efficiency that we talked about before. So this is a good way that we can actually identify impediments. So is there something that's causing us to be blocked continuously when we're working? Maybe it's product owners coming in and changing priorities, or maybe we don't have a business partner that's available for doing our UATs at the time. But now what we do is we've got a way that we can highlight this and that we can communicate with them to show them the impact of what is happening. And simply what we do for waste, Ken talked about 7 different measures of waste. We're just looking at one of these at the moment. We plan to expand that, but we just look at waste in our backlog, where we're taking a look at, this is the volume of stories that you have in your backlog that haven't been touched within the last 6 months. So if they haven't been touched, well, then we're assuming that all context associated with that is lost as well. So really the amount of effort you would put into these originally is lost, and that's waste. And just quickly, I'll look at these. This is, you talked again about patterns in the data. So this is, we're looking at our work in progress. So in this particular squad here, you can see in that circle, they had, must be 30 items that were in progress. They finished they were doing their planning, and they identified another pile of stories. And then they started delivering these. So the question is, why did they define all these extra stories here instead of focusing on these 30 stories and bringing them to completion instead of starting a lot of other things there? Other things that you see here is the pattern where you see this widening, that kind of base. That's indicating that you're working a lot of things in parallel and then closing them all off at the very end of a sprint. What you'd like to be able to see is this kind of it's like we call it the New York skyline, where it's going up and down like this, that you're starting and finishing, you're finishing your stories, you're swarming on, you're getting them closed very quickly. Similarly, you can look at your backlog. So in this case, instead of looking at work in progress, it's just looking at our backlog. This isn't really a lean metric, but it's interesting to look at that you've got 300 things in your backlog on average, and you're still creating new ones and delivering them, to create new ones and delivering. But my question there would be, 300 things in the backlog, how old are these? Are they just sitting there? Are these going to become a waste as well? So it's a good way to be transparent and to actually take action and tidy up our backlogs again. So the question is, do these work? So within Fidelity Ireland here, we took a look at 18 mission critical projects. We worked on these for 1 year, and this was with the support of our leadership team. So we've a very good leader here in Ireland who has a focus on this, and every month we actually get one of these projects come in and to talk about their journey and so on. But what you were able to see, that in the case of 1 year across these 18 projects, that you got a 48% increase in cycle time. Well, that should really be a decrease. We got faster, and the productivity was nearly doubled again. It increased by 87%, and that's in the case of 1 year. So these flow metrics, these lean metrics, they really just provide complete transparency as to what's happening in our projects. They enable us to ask the right kind of questions, and it helps teams really focus. And for us, there's other people on the call here who implemented an improvement program. They weren't really doing anything with the flow metrics, but you could actually use the flow metrics to measure the impact of that improvement program. So I'll leave it at that, Ken, and hopefully we still have a couple of minutes for questions.
Brilliant stuff. That's really impressive stuff, Vince.
I talk fast.